In Cumbria, a county in the north of England, there's a creepy local legend I thought I would share with you all. You see, I sometimes go camping in the Lake District, and this is a story that's always on my mind when I'm resting in my tent at night. I should say, the Lake District is a national park which has as many as 16 lakes and tarns in it, most of which have claimed sightings of this spirit. They call her the Horsewoman. It all began a very long time ago, when a young Cumbrian lad named Dobson went out on the waters one day. The weather was fair, the water calm, and Dobson was going to use his free time doing what he loved best: fishing. Angling beneath the sun and occasionally sipping from his wineskin, he eventually became weary and so closed his eyes for what he believed to be a short time. But the day soon passed, while Dobson snoozed away and the sun began to set. As the shadows of evening lengthened, Dobson awoke. Sitting up in his boat, he noticed he had drifted far from where he started. The beginnings of a fog slowly misted its way along the surface of the water and stretched out towards the land. Not wanting to be on the lake in the dark of night, as well as what looked to be a thick fog looming, he hastily moved back to shore. Good timing too, for as soon as he stepped onto land, it was as if the waters and earth were shrouded in a shifting, murky shroud. After dragging his boat a safe distance on shore, Dobson began his journey on foot. He knew the way back, across the dirt path and tall, looming trees, but the darkness wouldn't be of much comfort, for who knew what could be scouring those roads? While he was armed with a bollock knife, he wasn't a fighter, so had hoped he would be able to reach home without seeing a soul. Unfortunately for him, there are worse things than beasts and bandits that cross these mortal plains. Step by step, Dobson's feet crushed the dirt beneath him. Short echoes sounded out his footsteps. Now and then he believed he was being followed. He'd stand still, listening to the waters of the lake lapping over the shore, the trees rustling in the low breeze, and the sounds of animals that rose with the moon. It would only take a moment, and then he would continue his passage. Home was still some ways away, no time to dally. He had walked this path before, but now it seemed unending. Trying to distract himself, he began quietly singing hymns, something he believed would help soothe his nervous soul. Strangely, he heard something. It was a quiet splashing sound. It sounded out for a few moments and then silence fell, like something walking out of the lake and onto the shore. Dobson, fearful, began moving on faster now, though eager not to draw attention to himself. As he moved, there came a rhythmic thudding sound, steps getting louder and closer. He recognized the noise as that of a horse gradually approaching. Listening closely, it seemed as though there was only one, and this rather put him at ease. Perhaps the individual could offer him a faster journey home, or at least a companion to travel with. But this relief was short-lived, for as the hoofsteps drew closer, he felt a fearful chill. He didn't know why, so decided to err on the side of caution. Stepping back off the beaten path and onto the grass, he waited, trying to keep calm and still, and thinking that perhaps he could get a good look of the rider. He waited as the animal drew closer and closer until she appeared. Atop the back of a large, handsome, dark steed was the most beautiful woman Dobson had ever seen. Her hood drawn back across her shoulders, covered by her long, fair hair. Her kind, enchanting face, noble and composed. She sat gracefully, with a long cloak surrounding her arms, though not hiding her dress beneath, one which unmistakably denoted wealth and status. Dobson was captivated. He only broke from his stun when she stopped and looked over at him. A gentle smile charmed her face, and she spoke, asking Dobson his name. Flustered, he bowed his head and answered, to which she nodded and greeted him back, though without giving her name in turn. The lady inquired as to why he was out so late, walking alone in the dark. He revealed how he had been out fishing, and after falling asleep in his boat, had drifted down the lake. A kindly look of concern shaped her expression. She exclaimed that he was still far from home, but that she could help speed his journey. It was strange, but he felt as though he was actually closer than she made out. But with this fog, it was hard to say, and he supposed she had no reason to lie. She reached out her hand as if to help him climb on the back of the horse. He responded and went to meet her hand, but stopped and slightly withdrew. There was that feeling again, stronger this time, as if alerting him that something was wrong. But the rider merely cocked her head, smiling still, and urged him up. Dobson, brushing aside the feeling, believing it to be nothing more than his nerves getting the better of him, smiled back and reached out. Their hands drew closer, and while that feeling continued to surge further through him, Dobson fought through it. Just as he was about to meet her grasp, the clouds above broke, allowing the piercing moonlight to shine down upon them. Dobson stopped, not moving, and now frozen in his stance at the sight before him. In the light of the moon, she changed. Her fair, flowing hair became thin, dark, and sodden, stringing down her gaunt, demonic face. Her skin seemed almost transparent, her eyes black as the night sky. Her smile, once comforting, now a threatening grin. She reached out her emaciated hand, which now resembled more of a claw. The clothing she wore appeared worn and torn, which sagged across her steed. That horse, once it looked strong, proud, and dark, now resembled more of a hellish beast. Thin and pale, menacing, ragged, and furious looking. Dobson couldn't believe his eyes. She saw the look on his face as he noticed her arm, now true to herself. Her grin twisted into a snarl, and she lashed out at Dobson, desperately trying to grab a hold of him. Dobson fell backwards, narrowly avoiding being caught in her grasp. Upon hitting the dirt, the horse reared up, letting out a distorted call, its rider glaring coldly. Staring into those dark abyssal eyes, one thought screamed through his mind. "Run!" Dobson turned, launching himself off of the ground, and began sprinting away. The roar of the steed called out around him, rumbling amongst the trees and racing across the lake. Running and weaving throughout the trees, struggling not to run into anything hidden by the fog, he could hear her giving chase. The thundering of the horse's hooves beating against the earth resonated around poor Dobson as he fled, casting doubt as to just where she was. More to his horror is that the rider wasn't making a sound, only the horse could be heard, and given his heavy footsteps and rapid heartbeat, for all he knew, she could be right behind him. He hoped the trees would provide him enough cover and perhaps even slow her down, but it always seemed like she was keeping pace. He prayed and prayed with every step. "Please don't let her get me, please." The cold air rushed against him, but the cold he felt within himself was rising. She was close, but he didn't know just how close. Running and running, he wouldn't turn around, and therefore couldn't see that ghostly rider, pressing on through the mist, through the trees, and gaining on him, stretching out her bony arm, readying for when he was in reach. The hoofbeats pounded. Dobson knew he hadn't much time. He kept running, kept praying, just a little bit further. "Get me home, please get me home." He could feel her presence. She was reaching out for him. So close, she was so close, and then a wall, short enough for Dobson to catch it. He jumped, but fell to the floor with a heavy thud. Ignoring the pain, he turned back quickly to see the horse staring down at him from the other side of the wall. It wasn't moving, just staring at him. Dobson shuffled back until he hit something. He slowly turned around to see a gravestone. He was in the churchyard. He turned back. The rider had pulled her hood over her head, but he could still see those dark, pitted eyes glaring at him. After a moment, she pulled at the reins, and the horse turned back into the trees and the fog. Dobson was frozen. He sat there for a while, looking out into the fog, expecting to see her pacing along the edge of town. But no, she wasn't there. He breathed with relief, though felt his gaze being drawn towards the lake. There, in the moonlight, he saw her one last time. The rider and steed galloping across the waters, clear as day, before fading from sight. Dobson was the first, perhaps not to witness her, but certainly to give testimony, and definitely not the last. The horsewoman still gives me creeps to this day. Just the thought of her strolling around outside my tent at night. No thank you. But I suppose you might feel differently. It's just a story after all. But should you ever find yourself wandering around the Lake District, you maybe consider spending a few nights. In the cool of the evening, you could take a stroll by the waters, and who knows, perhaps you'll see her galloping across the waters and towards the shore.